Zombie viruses have destroyed civilization dozens of times across fiction, but most people have no idea how different these pathogens actually are. From viruses that turn you into a mindless corpse, to fungus that networks your brain into a hive mind. Today, we're breaking down every major zombie virus type and what makes each one uniquely terrifying, starting with the one that infected literally everyone on Earth without them even knowing, wildfire virus. The wildfire virus already infected you, and everyone you know, every human being on the planet carries it in their blood right now, completely dormant, waiting for you to die so it can wake up and turn you into a walking corpse. Before you dismiss this as generic zombie nonsense, hear me out. The wildfire virus operates on a two-stage infection system that breaks every rule. Stage 1 spread globally through airborne transmission with a 99.9% infection rate. The CDC discovered it in April 2010, traced it to a French biomedical facility, and by August, declared it a global pandemic. But here's the kicker. Nobody noticed. The initial wildfire infection is completely asymptomatic and non-fatal. You carry it in your neural tissue, it sits there doing absolutely nothing, and you live a normal life. You are infected. You just don't know it yet. Stage 2 only activates when you die or get bitten by a zombie. If a zombie bites you, the wound triggers necrosepsis that kills you within 8 to 48 hours. The virus then reanimates you anywhere from 3 minutes to 8 hours after death. And this is where it gets genuinely disturbing. Only your hindbrain comes back online. Your brainstem, the reptile parts that control aggression and movement. The frontal lobe stays dead. Your personality, your memories, your ability to think like a human, all of that is gone permanently. What walks around wearing your face is just the animal parts of your brain piloting a corpse. The reanimation speed correlates directly to your mental state at death. Die violently or while experiencing extreme emotion, you come back faster. Sometimes in under 3 minutes. Die peacefully in your sleep could take 8 hours. The virus literally feeds on rage and fear to accelerate resurrection. Community debates rage over whether the French lab origin proves wildfire is man-made or if the vague language leaves room for natural pandemic theories. Either way, the philosophical horror is identical. Every human became a biological time bomb without knowing it. You could live 50 years carrying wildfire, die of old age in a hospital bed, and reanimate 4 hours later to eat the nurse changing your sheets. But if you think a global asymptomatic carrier pandemic is bad, wait until you hear about the virus that rewrites your brain into a completely different organ that doesn't need food, water, or oxygen to function. Solanum virus. If you think getting bitten by a zombie is bad, wait until you hear what happens inside your body for the next 23 hours. The Solanum virus is a 100% fatal fluid-based retrovirus, and I can prove exactly why it's the most methodical killer on this list. Here's the thing. Most zombie viruses kill you fast or turn you immediately. Solanum takes its time. You get infected through any fluid contact, bites, scratches, kissing, sexual activity, blood transfers, even organ donations, and then you're on a clock. 1 hour in, you feel pain and see discoloration spreading from the wound. 5 hours, fever kicks in along with dementia. 8 hours, severe dementia. 11 hours, total paralysis. 16 hours, you slip into a coma. 20 hours, your heart stops, and then at approximately 23 hours after infection, you reanimate as a zombie. But here's where it gets weird. The virus doesn't just kill you and bring you back. While you're dying, Solanum replicates inside your frontal lobe cells and destroys them simultaneously. Then it mutates your entire brain into a completely different organ. Not a damaged brain. A new organ. One that requires zero energy, zero water, zero oxygen. Your body becomes a biological impossibility that can withstand extreme temperatures, pressure, and pain that would obliterate a living human. The only treatment is amputation of the infected limb, and even that has a 10% success rate. The medical consensus is genuinely suicide via brain destruction. That's the official advice. Destroy your own brain before the virus does it for you, and the virus is shockingly selective. It only reanimates humans. Animals infected before death cannot reanimate because the virus specifically targets human neural architecture. Even mosquitoes instinctively refuse to bite infected blood. The virus also cannot reanimate bodies that are already dead, because once your heart stops, your bloodstream goes stagnant, and Solanum needs flowing blood to reach the brain. So, if you die from a heart attack and then get zombie blood in your mouth, you're fine. Dead, but fine. Now here's the mystery. The first documented case of Solanum supposedly emerged from South Africa, but the actual outbreak originated in China and was immediately suppressed by the government. Decades of research later, no natural sample of Solanum has ever been isolated. Nobody has found this virus in the wild. Not in animals, not in soil, not in water, nothing. It appeared in humans, spread globally, and yet has zero detectable natural origin, which raises the question nobody wants to answer. If Solanum isn't natural and governments actively covered up its emergence, what exactly created it? But at least Solanum gives you 23 hours to say goodbye. The next virus doesn't even give you 23 seconds. Rage virus. The rage virus wasn't supposed to exist. Scientists at Cambridge Primary Primate Research Center were developing an anger inhibitor using Ebola as the delivery system, which sounds insane even before everything went wrong. Within 2 weeks of isolating the Ebola genome, it reacted to the inhibitor compound and mutated it into the exact opposite effect. Instead of suppressing rage, it amplified it into uncontrollable homicidal aggression. And I can prove it. The infection speed alone breaks everything we understand about viral transmission. 10 to 20 seconds. That's the incubation period from exposure to complete behavioral takeover. Higher exposure equals faster onset, but even a single drop of infected blood is sufficient to turn someone. The virus tore through Britain's entire population in exactly 4 weeks because one infected individual could decimate a dense crowd within minutes. Population density became a death sentence. London fell in days, not weeks, because the underground turned into a pressurized infection chamber where thousands of commuters became rage-fueled killing machines trapped in tunnels together. Here's where it gets dark. The rage virus is technically a recombinant Ebola strain that produces rabies-like psychological symptoms while maintaining Ebola's hemorrhaging. Infected subjects experience extreme homicidal rage while simultaneously suffering chronic internal and external bleeding. Red eyes, constant bleeding, attacking anything that moves. The virus commandeers the brain's aggression centers while the body literally bleeds itself out from the inside. They're running full sprint while hemorrhaging from every orifice, which should be physically impossible. The human body shouldn't be capable of that level of exertion while experiencing massive blood loss, but the virus overrides every survival mechanism to keep the host attacking until complete systemic failure, but it only infects primates. Transmission occurs through blood, saliva, bites, and the infected's signature move, vomiting blood directly into victims' faces, which is, not ideal. Animals walk past infected humans completely unbothered because the virus can't cross species barriers beyond primate physiology. The community debates whether these are even true zombies since the infected remain biologically alive. They're not reanimated corpses. They're living humans whose brains have been hijacked by a hybrid bioweapon accidentally created from well-intentioned research. They starve. They die. They need oxygen. Early infected and 28 days later were already dropping dead from dehydration and exhaustion after the initial outbreak wave. But here's the kicker. 28 years later, alpha variants emerged. These aren't mindless rage monsters anymore. They retained higher brain function, developed increased muscle mass, and gained the ability to plan coordinated attacks. The virus evolved intelligent leadership variants that could organize the mindless infected into tactical hunting parties. One alpha could direct dozens of standard infected like a hive mind commander, turning random violence into strategic ambushes. At least the original infected eventually starved to death, unlike the T-virus, which turns hosts into functionally immortal bioweapons that don't need food or water to keep hunting. T-virus. The T-virus is the one that started the entire bioweapon manufacturing industry, and I can prove it. In September 1977, Dr. James Marcus cracked something nobody had managed before: stable genetic recombination across species barriers. He took annelid genes, spliced them into the progenitor viral genome, and created a retrovirus that could hijack any living cell's DNA and force it to manufacture new variants. That's the T-virus, a literal genetic factory that rewrites biology on command. Here's where it gets weird. The virus doesn't just spread one way. Umbrella designed it with multiple transmission routes depending on the application. Injection for controlled bioweapon deployment, water contamination for mass infection, which is exactly what happened when Raccoon City's dam and sewage systems got compromised. Direct fluidic contact through bites and scratches for field spread, and airborne transmission under specific laboratory conditions. Because why not cover every possible angle when you're building weapons to destabilize governments? But the real breakthrough wasn't the transmission methods. It was what the virus did to infected hosts. Most zombie viruses kill you and reanimate the corpse. The T-virus keeps you alive. Your organs fail, your brain shuts down, severe necrosis sets in across your entire body, and you develop cannibalistic aggression strong enough to tear through metal doors. But technically, you're still breathing. You're a living weapon suffering complete cognitive collapse while your body refuses to die. That's not even the disturbing part. The T-virus enables genetic recombination between different species. Drop it into a human, it hijacks their DNA. Drop it into a dog, same thing. Drop it into both simultaneously in a lab environment, and you can crossbreed traits between them. That's how Umbrella mass-produced bioorganic weapons across their entire global research network. They weren't just making zombies. They were engineering custom monsters by mixing genetic material from anything they could find. The Epsilon strain variant takes this even further. Roughly 1 in every few hundred infected undergoes a rare secondary metamorphosis into a licker. Their entire skull splits open, exposing a massively expanded brain. They grow a barbed prehensile tongue that can pierce through bone. Their muscles reform into something that can sprint across ceilings and tear through reinforced doors. and they lose all vision, but gain echolocation accurate enough to track a heartbeat 3 rooms away. Then you have the derivative strains. T. veronica is arguably the most dangerous variant ever created because it lets the host retain full intellectual capabilities while gaining all the physical benefits. You're not fighting a mindless zombie. You're fighting someone who remembers exactly who they were, can plan complex strategies, and happens to have superhuman strength and regeneration. Umbrella turned a single breakthrough in September 1977 into a biological weapons program that spanned decades and produced hundreds of distinct creature types, all from one virus that figured out how to rewrite DNA on demand. But if you think corporate bioweapon manufacturing is bad, wait until you hear about the virus that compressed its entire infection cycle into under 60 seconds and mutated daily. Green flu. The green flu is either the most unstable virus in fiction or the most brilliantly engineered bioweapon ever designed, and honestly, both explanations are terrifying. Patient Zero probably walked into Mercy Hospital in Fairfield, Pennsylvania about 2 weeks before Left 4 Dead begins. Just walked in, coughed a bit, infected everyone. And here's the thing, the virus didn't just spread, it evolved in real time. Early infections took up to 4 days to turn someone. By the time the game starts, you've got less than a minute before you're clawing at your friends' faces. The virus compressed its own incubation period by 5,760% in 2 weeks. That's not mutation. That's adaptation on a scale that breaks every rule of virology. Transmission is a nightmare. Blood, saliva, vomit, direct fluid contact, all the usual suspects. But it's also airborne, sometimes. The virus switches between airborne and contact-only transmission daily. CDA operatives wore biohazard level 4 protective suits, the kind you use for hemorrhagic fever outbreaks, because they had no idea which transmission method would be active on any given Tuesday. Imagine suiting up like you're handling Ebola samples because a virus might decide to go airborne overnight. That's the green flu. Approximately 1 in 3 males are immune, 1 in 9 females. The math works out to about 22% of the total population, which tracks with X-linked recessive inheritance patterns. If you're a woman, you drew the short genetic straw. If you're a man, you've got triple the odds of surviving. And if you're one of the 8 known immune survivors, congratulations. You're also an asymptomatic carrier who spreads infection to everyone nearby while feeling completely fine. The virus kept you alive specifically to use you as a walking plague vector. About a third of infected people transform into special infected. Within that third, 7 distinct mutations exist. Witches and spitters are exclusively female. Jockeys, hunters, smokers, chargers, and tanks are exclusively male. Boomers show up as both. The virus is reading host biology and selecting mutations based on sex chromosomes. It's not random. It's targeted genetic modification happening inside a living body within 60 seconds of infection. The community's split on whether this is a design flaw or intentional feature. One camp argues carriers prove the green flu was a botched military experiment, immunity gone wrong. The other camp says carriers are the entire point. Keep a percentage alive, make them spread it, maximize infection density. Either way, someone engineered this thing. Natural zoonotic spillover doesn't produce gender-specific mutations and daily transmission changes. That's lab work. CEDA called it a flu to prevent mass panic. It's not a flu. It's closer to rabies with a PhD in evolutionary biology. And it gets worse every single day. At least the green flu gives you a fighting chance if you're immune, unlike what's coming next, which doesn't care about your genetics, your gender, or your survival instincts, because it's not even a virus. Cordyceps brain infection. Real cordyceps is a fungus that hijacks the brains of insects, forces them to climb to high ground, then explodes their heads open to spread spores. It's horrifying, it's real, and it only works on bugs. The Last of Us asked a simple question: what if it worked on humans? And the answer decimated 60% of the planet in a few months. Here's the thing. This isn't a virus. It's a parasitic fungus that requires a living host to survive, which means you can't catch it from a corpse. The infection originated in South America, hitched a ride on contaminated crops, and entered the United States in late September 2013. Within weeks, the world ended. The progression is methodical. Stage 1 hits around 2 days post-infection. Higher brain function shuts down. Aggression kicks in, and you become a runner, hyper-violent, and fast. Stage 2 arrives roughly 2 weeks later. The fungus corrupts your visual cortex, altering how you perceive light and movement. By stage 3, about a year in, you're completely blind. Facial tissue scars over, and the fungus rewires your brain to develop primitive echolocation. You click, you listen, you hunt. Stage 4 is rare, taking over a decade to manifest. At this point, hardened fungal plates grow across your body like organic armor, turning you into a bloater, a walking fungal tank that can rip people apart with its bare hands. But here's where it gets weird. The infection doesn't just create individual zombies. It creates a network. The fungus grows underground, spreading through sewers, subway tunnels, and abandoned buildings like a distributed neural system. Infected hosts become nodes in a living hive mind, sensing movement and vibrations across miles of fungal threads. Step on one strand of mycelium helium in a subway tunnel, and every clicker within a square mile knows exactly where you are. And that's the environmental trick nobody talks about. Cordyceps thrives in enclosed spaces, but struggles in open air. The countryside is relatively safe. Cities are death traps. The spores can't spread effectively outdoors, which is why humanity's last strongholds exist in quarantine zones with strict decontamination protocols. But underground, you're walking into a biological cathedral where every surface is connected to a fungal intelligence that's been growing for years. The real kicker? This is all biologically impossible. Real cordyceps is species-specific. The variant that infects ants can infect beetles. The one that infects beetles can infect spiders. It would take millions of years of evolutionary pressure for cordyceps to jump from insects to mammals, let alone humans. The fictional strain in The Last of Us skips that entire process, which is either a terrifying mutation or proof that someone engineered it. The game never confirms which. Community debates rage over whether the clicker's echolocation clicks represent true communication or just mimicry of the fungus sensing vibrations. Some players think the infected retain fragments of consciousness buried under fungal control. Others argue they're just meat puppets, being piloted by a parasite that doesn't care if the host suffers. The evidence leans toward the latter. When you kill a clicker and examine its body, the fungal growth has completely consumed the face, the throat, the brain. There's nothing human left to communicate. At least the cordyceps can't infect you after you're dead. But if you think a fungal hive mind controlling millions of blind zombies through underground neural networks is bad, Pathogen HK combines the worst parts of HIV and a prion disease into a single nightmare. Pathogen HK. Pathogen HK is technically classified as a prion disease, not a virus, which means it shouldn't exist at all. Before you roll your eyes, hear me out. Prions are misfolded proteins. They contain zero genetic material. They cannot recombine with viruses. They cannot mutate. They're essentially biological glitches that spread by forcing other proteins to misfold the same way, like a photocopy error that keeps reproducing itself. Kuru, the disease pathogen HK evolved from, is exactly that. A prion disease spread through cannibalism in Papua New Guinea. Simple, brutal, and following every known rule about how prions operate. But here's where it gets weird. When researchers analyzed pathogen HK, they found stage 2 HIV and stage 2 Kuru viral genome fragments inside it. A prion disease containing viral DNA. That's like finding a rock with a beating heart. It shouldn't be physically possible. The two categories exist in completely separate biological classifications for a reason. Prions are proteins. Viruses are genetic material wrapped in protein. They don't merge. They can't merge. Except somehow, this one did. The current theory is that pathogen HK represents a hybrid pathogen, a chimera that exists in the gray area between viral and prion classification. The endemic Kuru prion somehow incorporated viral genetic material, creating something that behaves like both simultaneously, which breaks every rule we have about how either category functions. It spreads like a prion, forcing protein misfolding, but it also mutates and evolves like a virus, generating new infected forms with different capability. The scientific community is still arguing about whether to classify it as a novel pathogen category entirely. Transmission is exclusively through blood contact. Physical injuries, open wounds, direct blood exposure. The moment infected blood touches your bloodstream, incubation begins. Could be seconds, could be days. The variability depends on factors nobody fully understands. Viral load, maybe. Individual immune response, protein structure variations. During that window, you experience pain that witnesses describe as indescribable. Your mental faculties degrade rapidly. Speech becomes impossible. Memory collapses. Then the virus, or prion, or whatever the hell it is, completely hijacks your nervous system. Infected hosts transform into creatures with zero regard for physical safety. Incredibly fast, incredibly aggressive. They'll sprint until their muscles tear. They'll climb until their hands shred. The virus repurposes the body into a weapon that doesn't care if it destroys itself in the process. Pain receptors still function, but the brain no longer processes pain as a warning signal. It just keeps pushing the body past every natural limitation. Upon death, the host reanimates as a walker. Slow, clumsy, but unrelenting. The speed and coordination vanish. What remains is pure aggression in a shambling corpse. The degradation continues post-mortem, breaking down motor control while preserving just enough brain function to maintain movement and territorial hostility. But occasionally, the body mutates into rare forms. Suiciders that explode on contact. Rams that charge with enhanced strength. Butchers with blade-like appendages. Evolutionary lottery tickets that show up without warning or pattern. HK1 is the genetically modified variant, created by Dr. Reuben Reed, heavily implied to be a weaponized descendant of the original strain, engineered specifically to trigger the autophage process during the Los Angeles outbreak, which means someone looked at a hybrid prion virus nightmare that already defied biological classification and thought, yeah, let's make it worse. Let's weaponize it. The scientific debate continues. Is it a virus that mimics prion behavior? A prion that acquired viral capabilities through some unknown mechanism? The hybrid classification explains the rapid mutations and multiple infected forms, but it also means we have zero framework for understanding how it operates at a fundamental level. Prions don't mutate. Viruses don't fold proteins. Pathogen HK does both. If you think a biological paradox that breaks classification systems is disturbing, wait until you hear about the government-engineered flesh-eating bacteria designed to sterilize the entire planet, the Black Rainbow. Everyone talks about viruses that create zombies. Nobody talks about the bacteria designed to exterminate them, and I can prove it exists. The Black Rainbow is a flesh-eating bacteria engineered by a shadow government organization called Zona as part of something called the Fourth Strike weapon system. Not the first strike, not the second, the fourth, which means there are 3 other apocalyptic bioweapons we don't even know about, and this one was designed specifically to sterilize the entire planet of zombie life. Not cure it, not contain it. Delete it. Here's where it gets weird. The only way to access the Black Rainbow control system is through the zombie thumbprints of a deceased US president. Let that sink in. Someone in the government planned for a scenario where the president would die, reanimate as a zombie, and then have their undead biometrics used as a failsafe for a planetary extermination weapon. That's not contingency planning. That's fatalism, with extra steps. Roberta Warren spent the entire 4th season of Z Nation hunting this thing down after Zona operatives stole the Black Rainbow intelligence from an Arctic research facility. The weapon itself represents the culmination of Project Black Rainbow, a classified government program dedicated to creating weaponized biological agents. Unlike every other pathogen on this list, Black Rainbow wasn't an accident, a mutation, or a naturally occurring organism that got out of hand. It was deliberately engineered from the ground up with a single purpose: use biology to end biology. But here's the kicker. The Black Rainbow has almost zero cultural footprint. You can find 1,000 breakdowns of the T-virus, entire wikis dedicated to cordyceps staging, community debates about whether Solanum could actually exist. The Black Rainbow? Barely documented. Minimal fan theories. Almost no analysis. It's the most technologically sophisticated anti-zombie weapon ever conceived in fiction, and it's been completely overlooked because Z Nation doesn't have the same reach as The Walking Dead or Resident Evil, which raises a genuinely unsettling question. If you use biological warfare to end biological warfare, what does that make you? Zona believed the answer was savior. The show suggested the answer was something much darker. Because when your solution to a plague involves needing a dead president's zombie fingerprints and a weapon system coded as the 4th apocalypse option, you've stopped trying to save humanity. You've just decided who gets to be the last one standing. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every fatal decision survivors make in zombie apocalypses, click the video on the screen now.